Beautiful. Thank you, Savannah, for throwing that in. All
Course.
righty. Rock and roll, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. This is the Before You Bid Tennessee Tax Sale Strategies Explained. I am your host here, Corey King. I'm joined by the wonderful and amazing co-hosts here of attorney and partner at Melrose Title, LuAnn Hileman, as well as super realtor with over a decade of experience in Savannah Price coming in here for this discussion today. I really appreciate you guys for jumping on and joining this. For those of you who are jumping on, like participating in this is going to be incredibly like interactive. So I wanted this to be collaborative in here as well. If you've got the ability to have like your camera on, I'd certainly appreciate it because it's better than just kind of talking into the void. So if you're in a space, hey, you can put your camera on, you can engage. This is going to be a good dynamic discussion. Today we're going to be covering all the way through like how do properties end up at the tax sale, what steps happen as we get into it as you're bidding, what strategies you should be looking for, what due diligence should really look like for you, what title issues could be coming up along this way. And we're going to be available for some Q&A here towards the end. I want to make sure I've got that. So if you have questions, you can feel free to use the chat feature. I will make some time as well here towards the end to available. People can kind of raise their hand, chime in, all good, right? So again, really appreciate everybody for jumping on here. Glad again appreciate having LuAnn. LuAnn and I go way back
Yeah.
to Oliver Springs High School. I think probably the one person who probably knows me longer than anybody in Knoxville
Yeah.
at this point, which has been amazing to see us go on our respective journeys and still now be able to work together here many moons later. And then, of course, Savannah and I have known each other for pretty much my whole career in the space, and it's been just a wealth of knowledge in this. And Savannah has kind of taught on this topic before, so this is why I wanted to bring somebody who's got some expertise in the space for us to chat. So I guess I want to kind of pose this out, and this can go into the chat as well. If you've never been to the tax sale before, let's say in the past you've never been to one before, go throw like a little one in the chat. I'm curious to see like how many people are gonna kind of chime in on that. This would be their first one that they'll be attending next week. All right, cool. Adam, Day, good. Garrett, cool. So it's good to see. I already know from my calls, I'm gonna see a lot of like familiar faces there. These are big events that tend to show up. You'll get a lot of people that will turn out for these. So it kind of becomes a almost a de facto networking event, like in and of itself, right? Um, to get us started, to guide this out, let's dive into a little bit of how properties make its way here. Effectively, how do these people that have these properties end up at this, and what's the general goal for the county at the end of the day? I'll kind of maybe kick this off to LuAnn if you want to kind of walk us through just the general steps of stop paying taxes, chancellery court, etc.
Yeah. There is state statute out there that basically says if you don't pay your property taxes, then there can be a lien put on your property. And technically speaking, whoever is the owner of the property as of January 1 that year is who's responsible for the taxes getting paid. Now, we changed that with contract law, right? So when we do PSAs and we do prorations at the closing table, that changes some. But the responsible party is the person who owns the property as of January 1. If those taxes don't get paid for 2 years, is the statute. So the list has to be certified by April 1st of the second calendar year after the taxes were due. So you're talking the taxes have to be 2 years past due. Then there's a publication of the delinquent taxes. That has to be turned over to the tax attorney 20 days, I think, prior to the publication. And then they have time to go in and pay. You can, so I mean, once it's listed, you can go in and pay, right? Like you can just say, oh crap, I didn't realize I hadn't paid my taxes. I'm going to go catch these up. If you don't do that, then it can get turned over to the Chancery Court, like you said, and there can be a an order that goes down to sell, which gives the county the authority to sell that property at the tax sale. How far do you want me to continue, or do you just want me to kind of,
Well, that
we'll
I
go
think
there?
that's a good step in and of itself, right? Is
Okay.
people have to be at least like 2 years behind on their taxes.
Yeah.
Now, the county's going to send that through a court order to ultimately their goal in this is not to necessarily give investors smoking deals. They purely are just wanting to get
They
caught
just want to get
up
paid.
on tax revenue that they're
Yeah.
owed, and that's that. And this area is, I would say, notoriously probably undervalued from like a tax standpoint anyway. So like we see when you see these tax burdens of what people owe, it's relatively like small amounts. And some people don't know that they maybe own that property. They inherited it. They don't know. Now they owe it on air. Or I mean, they financially get behind, but the county just ultimately wants to get paid, not necessarily give investors smoking deals. It just kind of so happens that there could be opportunities that come up in that. Now, once somebody buys a property, though, so you go to the tax sale and you're going to make your one, you have to register in advance. Savannah went ahead and threw that link in the chat. That's the trustee.knoxcounty.org is where you can find the resources there. So if you do intend to go to this tax sale and you want to bid, you need to go ahead and register beforehand, so that way you are a registered bidder, not just like say necessarily showing up on the day. They'll ask you a couple quick questions. It's not too difficult to get registered on there. Now, once you go ahead and buy the property, so you go through the process, you make your bid, you win. Let's say if a common question comes up is, well, do I own this property outright? The answer to that being no, not necessarily. There's often what we call redemption periods that
Mhm.
come into this play, and that's going to be determined on how long these back taxes have been due. But let's kind of unpack this redemption period a little bit for everybody, because that's oftentimes where this gets maybe mixed up or lost in translation for folks, is they might think, well, hey, I just bought this property at a crazy good deal, but it's mine and I can start working on it. And that could be where you really get hemmed up on things. So maybe do you want to kind of let's talk through some redemption periods and redemption rights and what that could look like for
Yeah.
some people?
Well, so Knox County has changed a little bit of what they're doing. And they did put, properties that don't sell on the day of tax sale are eligible for rebid. So that period of recapture, that period, they changed that this year. It is, to my understanding, it's an absolute. When you win, with the exception of the properties that don't get purchased, which then go up for rebid on the 16th, I think is the continuance date that they've given for June. It's an absolute. I mean, you can pay down, I think 30% is what they said the day of auction, and then pay the rest 10 days later, or you can pay it in full that day and party on, people. But just because you can purchase it that day doesn't mean that it is a good, warrantable, marketable title. It is, lien free. It is free of encumbrances or occupants or anything like that. A lot of what I'm going to talk about from that standpoint is going to be more so, yes, you own it. That's great. That's awesome. But it's also going to be more precautionary. I am, I would say, do as I say, not as I do. Do as I say, not as I purchase. And so I have definitely taken on some significant risk with these tax sale properties because I had the resources and the understanding to do it. And a lot of people, when they get into it, they go, oh my gosh, it's mine. I'm just going to show up and be like, hey, I'm the new owner. This is East Tennessee. That's not how that works. People are not really excited when you tell them that you've bought their property at tax sale. And so, while you will own it that day, it is not going to be a clear and marketable title. And LuAnn can speak more towards clear and marketable because she's definitely probably bailed a lot of people out of that understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great segue. Let's go into it. Yeah, the way let's walk us through what is a clear marketable title and what are going to be the common issues that could come
Okay.
up in
So
these situations.
there's a lot to unpack here, so bear with me. So once you purchase the property, there is a statutory right of redemption period that depends on, like Corey said, how far behind the property taxes are.
Mhm.
So the kind of default that everybody thinks of is this 1 year right of redemption period. And that's typically because these properties get sold before they're over 5 years delinquent. So
Mhm.
that's our standard. As it goes up, as it's more delinquent, that right of redemption period decreases. So you can see some between 5 and 8 years come down to 180 day. right of redemption period. If it's over 8 years, it could even be as low as a 90-day right of redemption
Okay.
period. There's also some statutory language that says if there is evidence of abandonment, which it's very specific things you have to do to prove this. So you've got to do at least 3 inspections, etc. It can bring that down to 30 days. But when we talk about the right of redemption period, we're generally talking about that 1 year. Okay, that's what we're normally seeing in these cases. So what that means is the person who or people who lost the property in the tax sale have the right to redeem their property, meaning that they can go to the clerk of the court, they can file a motion and pay money into the court. Most people say, well, you just have to pay what was, past due, what was delinquent. Well, not necessarily. You've got to pay those taxes, but you have to pay the penalties, you have to pay the interest. At that point, there's court costs that have been added to it. And then an additional, I think the statutory amount right now is 12% interest on the purchase price. So it's not just as simple as saying, okay, I owed $2,500 in back taxes. I'm going to go down there and pay $2,500. It's going to be more than that, but you can still redeem it. And then you have to file that motion with the court saying that you have the right to redeem this property. And then the purchaser, within a 30-day time frame of you doing that, has the right to come back and say, well, I've provided insurance on this property for the last, 100 days, however long they've owned it at that point. I've mowed this property. I've removed hazards from this property, whatever. They can file with the court reasonable fees to be recouped. So you might have to pay those as well. HOA dues, for example, are considered a reasonable fee. So at that point, if the person follows through, files that motion, pays that money, then they can get that property back. So just because you bought it at tax sale, during that right of redemption period, there's still that possibility that they might come redeem the property. So the cautionary tale is don't go build a $450,000 house on a vacant piece of property if you're in that right of redemption period, because that is not considered a reasonable fee improvement to that property. Okay. So you don't want to give somebody else that money. When we're talking about clear and marketable title under the standard TAR form PSA, that means insurable as well. And the issue that we get into time and time again with insurability for title insurance purposes with regards to tax sales is a constitutional law consideration. I know this seems ridiculous to delve into constitutional law, but we're talking about right of ownership of property. So Fifth Amendment of the Federal Constitution, 14th Amendment of State Constitution, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. That's where we're at. So the issue that the title insurance underwriters have with respect to these tax sales is the notice to the owners of the property they feel is sometimes not sufficient to satisfy due process of law requirements. So I know this seems like very legalese, and I'm sorry, like I know that's annoying, but it really is their main concern. Their main concern is if you're just publishing, which is the requirement for notice of these properties, going to tax sale, and you're not giving actual notice to the individuals and you can't prove actual service of process, then they may not have had their due process of law to have their property taken. And so it could be a violation of their constitutional rights. Now, the problem is there's no statute of limitations on that. So I could have my property taken away at this tax sale in June, and then 30 years down the road, I could come back and say, hey, I never got notice of this. And then I've got a constitutional law case against the county for taking my property, which no title insurance underwriter wants any litigation on any property that they're going to insure, right? So what the title insurance underwriters have basically done is they've done a risk-based analysis, and they've gone in and for years and years and years, the main three, the top three underwriters, all said, we're not going to touch a tax sale for 20 years. We're not even going to look at it, because their risk analysis was that after 20 years, the chance of somebody coming back and making a due process of law claim, violation claim, is very slim. So they're saying after 20 years has passed, we'll insure this property. Well, since then, we have had some underwriters come into the area that are not, the top three, who have kind of pushed the envelope a little bit, which has been to our advantage. So Melrose, for example, writes with the top three: Fidelity, First American, and Old Republic. But we also added CADIC several years ago, which is Connecticut Attorneys Title Insurance Company. And the goal was to try to force the big three's hand a little bit, because CADIC said, we don't care how long it's been. We're going to look at it. If you tell us that you have a tax sale, we'll look at it. Now, they're not guaranteeing that they're going to insure it, but they're going to at least take a look at it, weigh the risk, and see if they're willing to move forward. So since that has happened, we have seen some changes with the big three. We now have, one of them will look at it after 7 years. One of them will look at it after 10 years. Old Republic's holding strong at 20 years. So, you've got a little bit more leeway there. A lot of people say, well, I don't want to hold this property for 7 years. Like, what's my other option? Well, there's a couple other options. If you find a cash buyer, for example, who doesn't want title insurance, then you can always sell without title insurance. That's not typically going to work if there's a lender involved, because the lender wants lender's title insurance policy if they're lending money for property. The other options are, if you can, and we've had this happen. Savannah said, very rightfully so, that most property owners are not excited when they find out you've bought their property, right? So going to them and saying, hey, can we get a quitclaim deed from you for this property so we can sell it? You're going to get a big fat laugh in your face, right? I mean, they're not going to do it. We have, shockingly, had some scenarios where there have been quitclaim deeds signed from the owners who lost it in tax sale. Now, that's very few and far between, but we've had some scenarios where it was owned by an entity. The entity went bankrupt. The owner, signer of the entity understood what was going on. He was like, this is fine. I'll sign the quitclaim deed. We could move on. Again, that's not standard. But sometimes you have children who live in different states, and this was property that was owned by their family way back when. They want nothing to do with it. They've never had an attachment to it. They've never paid the first dime towards it. They're fine signing a quitclaim deed. If you can get a quitclaim deed from the owner of the property, whoever owned it when they lost it during the tax sale, even if that means grandma owned it, grandma has now died, and grandma's heirs will sign the quitclaim deed. If you can get that, then it's insurable, because you've got the interest vested away by them signing that quitclaim deed. Other things that you have to think about, though, are any liens or deeds of trust, anything else that's out there against this property. It doesn't go away just because there was a tax sale. Savannah said that earlier, like, you're buying this property as is, right? So you're buying it subject to those things. You own it, but you also own what goes with it. So we can't ignore those. We can't ignore the party's interest in the property. Occasionally there will be a tax file in more rural county where you know that the person got actual notice, they have it notated in the file, that they sent a certified letter, the person got the certified letter and signed for it. If you have that, then an underwriter is way more willing to insure it because they know that there was actual notice. So then you don't have that due process of law issue going on. What else am I forgetting? I know I've thrown a ton at you.
No, that was fantastic. I super appreciate the breakdown. A couple takeaways. I mean, I caught out of this, right, is used to be, I think they used to really just consider notice would be like a posting in the paper would have been like
Yep.
considered like certificate notice, and it sounds like we need more than just that to get by to notify somebody. So like a certified letter or something would be best practice in there. I love actually the adjustments on the timelines because I was familiar with, yeah, closer to that 18 to 20 years. And that was usually like labeled as somebody either has the ability to come of age to claim these properties and or die. Like 20 years was kind of that standard there just because it was a reasonable timeline for somebody to come into there. Um, so it's cool to see that at least with that. We ran into this a couple of years ago on some vacant lots over in East Knoxville that the family actually had no idea that they owned it. It was kind of that case in Point Luann where like grandma died. They had no idea they even had that, or they thought it was like long gone. And we were able to work out a deal that was effectively kind of a cash for keys. Hey, we'll give you guys some money, sign this quick claim deed over to us. We were able to get that filed and then sold it to a builder who then went and built some nice spec homes on it. So there are those circumstances where somebody just frankly
Doesn't
doesn't
know.
know,
Yeah.
right? That even came into play. A common question, I hear comes up is just can I look at these properties? Like, is there any kind of tour thing set up? Other auction houses will have a day, a couple days before the actual auction, they'll create like an open house event where you can go and tour these properties. And so the question certainly comes up that naturally is just, well, can I look at these? Like, what's that? And the answer to that is no. It is an as is, like where is thing. Your best ability is going to be able to drive by it at best, because even walking onto the property would be considered trespassing at that point, right? So you're very much buying it as is, where is, and being willing to take that risk in there. Now, I guess before I'm going to go bid on something, can we let's talk some due diligence strategies that would come up. Like, what are some practical due diligence items I should be looking at prior to actually making my bid on something? I'll give some examples of what I'd know, and I'd love to hear Savannah's point on this. Like, just is this the actual parcel? Is this zoned appropriate for what I'm looking for in there? What is this, maybe in a floodplain? Is this going to cause some issues in the future for me? What might be those liens or code violations that exist on this that I'm inheriting? Savannah, what do you look for?
Well, one of the other things, call your insurance agent. It's like we're going to tell everyone, when they're looking at buying anything. Call your insurance agent. Has there ever been a structure fire on the property? Has there ever been, any claims that would kind of give you some insight into what this property is actually doing sitting vacant? Now, your purpose in purchasing this property, obviously we like to think, oh, we're going to get a great deal. You are also inheriting someone else's situation where they've washed their hands clean, whether knowingly or unknowingly, and you're walking into a situation where you're going to pick up someone else's mess. I will tell you, the potential, there's a bunch of different in the tax sale. So I will admit it, I'm a nerd. This is 70 pages almost. I've killed some trees, but I read every page. And it is front and back, so I didn't kill that many trees. But I will say it says, at each one of these listings, other matters affecting title. And it goes through subject to restrictions, zoning ordinances, utility drainage easements, setbacks, subject to any probate concerns regarding the prior owner. The tax map shows this property is on both sides of Andersonville Pike. The north part of the property completely cuts off this parcel, subject to the property being able to someday access Andersonville Pike with a possible right-of-way across the subject property. Subject to subject property needing a survey, as it involves both sides of Andersonville Pike, and there's no map recorded with meets and bounds description of the same. Total taxes due, $1,800. So you look at that and go, oh my gosh, this is great. I'm going to end up with 1.49 acres on Andersonville Pike and Powell. But you're also going to end up with a potential right of way. So I'm making a phone call to my lovely title company. Hey, let's go ahead and be proactive on this one. I'm going to call my surveyor, see how much the cost for a survey is. I'm going to drive by the property, but also I'm going to do some digging. What are your utility easements? What are your restrictions, your zoning ordinances, any setbacks? Knox County is great if you call them, but they're better if you go down there. I'm not saying this so like 30 people rush down there and piss a bunch of people off in Knox County. Please don't tell them Savannah Price sent you to do that. But I will say, go down there. Just go talk to them. Say, hey, listen, this is my first tax sale. Tanner Riley is the gentleman down there who's great to talk to and great to work with. Super, super sweet. But it's definitely, what's your purpose? Are you going to purchase something? I know there's a question in there. What happens if you build that $450,000 house? Well, what's your exit plan? If you buy that vacant land and you find out that, the IRS has put a lien on there for $60,000, well, you didn't just get a $1,800 piece of property. You got a little bit more than you bargained for. So what are the steps to getting the IRS to release a lien on a property that you now own? Can you build a $450,000 house with a $60,000 lien and still make money? I mean, those are the questions you have to ask yourself, being less than a week out from the tax sale. You all, my biggest advice, spend way more time researching this than the time it takes to raise your hand, commit to a bid, and purchase it. Because coming from someone who, LuAnn makes people who sign quitclaim deeds sound so nice and friendly. She makes them sound so sweet when she talks about them. There are definitely some instances where people are like, oh my gosh, yeah, I didn't know that, I'll sign this for you. And there are times where you ACH someone $1,500 so that they'll sign off their 1/9 of the property ownership, so that, and she's really mad about it, but she needs that $1,500 and that's the price she set. So she'll sign that quitclaim deed and that's the price you're willing to pay. I think that's the biggest thing is, if the property doesn't work out in the way that you intend to purchase and use it, what is your exit strategy that at least gets you your investment back, limits your liability, and gets you on down the road with as few bruises and bumps as possible? That's my goal. That's my due diligence when I look at these properties. So of all 70-ish pages, I'm not showing this on camera because I have a 3-page short list. And it's less than 30 properties. And some of these 30 properties, I'm probably going to end up down to 10 by the time all is said and done. One, because I'm extremely strict on the things that I personally purchase, because in the season of life that I'm in, it's not worth chasing people down for $1,500 quitclaim deeds too much. But I will say also, it's know your exit strategy and know that there are several good options for those. I can also tell you all the times that I haven't had any exit strategy and I've made horrible decisions and I've still gotten myself out of them by the grace of God and, some really great friends in title. So you can ask me about my crackheaded purchases at the title at the tax sales one of these days.
For those of you who might be looking for that like 70-page document that Savannah just pulled from that has all of that detailed information, I did just throw it in the chat. It is also available on that trustee website we talked about before, but I went ahead and made that available for everybody there. One thing I've done to help me digest some of this information a little bit more is to utilize just some AI pieces. I've taken that and thrown it through. I'm using Claude right now. I've been really nerding out on using that, but that's been able to help me decipher which ones might be worth looking at a little bit deeper. There's a play here too for those that are just, if you believe that this property is actually in a position of getting redeemed, there are people who play that game of bidding on something to just cash out on that investment.
At 12%.
Kind of return on yeah, exactly. Because you're making, upwards of like 12% on your money. So it's not like crazy, but also like invest at your own risk. Quick disclaimer, like this is not tax advice. This is not investing advice. This is just us here talking about what options are out there available for you, right? I wanted to actually kind of cover a couple things really fast, just for specifications if you are looking to go place a bid. There is a sort of more when you pre-register. You actually must be current on your own property taxes in order to go bid on this. Kind of crazy enough. They want you to be current on your own taxes before you're going to be able to go bid on anybody else in there. Funds must be done through certified funds, cashier's check, or ACH deposits. Personal checks are not accepted, and you can either pay in full or place a qualifying deposit and pay the balance within 10 days. That's the parameter that they're looking for. So a question comes up, well, can I get a loan? You do this. Not necessarily. You could probably talk with your favorite private money lender. If you're looking for some folks in that space, we're happy to make some recommendations there, but they are largely looking for payment in full at or within 10 days of the auction date in there as well. Right. So all right, great. So we covered some due diligence items. We covered some things I should be looking for in before getting into this. I am genuinely curious a little bit, Savannah. Like, do you want to, or do you mind sharing us a little story of, hey, like this is maybe a situation that
Sure,
things went a little right for me or things went a little bit sideways? Because I think
sure.
we can all high five over the wins like all day long. And
Yeah.
it's oftentimes in the stories where it's, hey, I got myself into a real pickle and here's where I got out of it, that we tend to gain some real insight. So if you don't mind, I mean, I'll
All right. Well, before I get
start the
started,
start the roll.
I am not anyone. While I am a licensed real estate agent and a broker, I am not your broker. I am not, I'm not anyone's babysitter. I'm not anyone's mom, and I'm not anyone's attorney or accountant. So I will say all of those as caveats. Do as I say, not as I do. And I want you all to keep in mind. I mean, I've been doing real estate over a decade, but risk aversion is a new concept to me. And so I will say, I mean, I'm like, hey, listen, I've got 10 grand in a dream. Let's go figure something out. And that is a really great way to make money sometimes. So let's just keep it all there. I will say, I've definitely put properties under contract that were up for tax sale before they went to tax sale and then paid off the taxes as long as Knox County would give a release, and went ahead and like paid the people, 3 times, 4 times what I would have paid at tax sale, but I didn't have to compete against anyone. I didn't have to bid. Now, that particular piece of property, I did spend $20,000 in a quiet title suit because there were 26 heirs. And so, I mean, it was exciting, but I kept it from tax sale and I was able to turn around and sell the property to a church nearby, and they used it. I've done those tax title certificates, which is a rider to a title insurance policy that actually, they will insure on certain tax sale properties depending on terms and conditions. I've done that to sell tax sale properties. I've purchased things at auction that were bought by someone at a tax sale and had issues and thought, oh, I'll clean that up, and decided that I really don't have capacity for that, and I threw it up for auction a couple weeks ago. So I mean, I've done some risk and some reward. My favorite tax sale purchase, and I will only say this because my goal with the tax sales is sustainable home ownership. Yes, I'm an investor with an above average knowledge of how this process works in the real estate market. Yes, I make money off of this, but my goal is to still be able to pass along to someone else the goal of owning a home. And so if I can facilitate that, I'm more than happy to do that. And also it helps clean up the area. It helps clean up Knoxville. And it's, if you can limit your liability, it's kind of fun in the process. So I purchased one. It was a little over an acre in Powell. It had an abandoned house on it. Actually, my dad remembered walking by that house when he was a kid. So, I mean, it had been abandoned for a hot minute. Don't tell anyone I said that. But it had been up for tax sale. The taxes were over 9 years. So it was a 90-day period, like you talked about, LuAnn. And what I did is actually within that 90-day period, again, do as I say, not as I do. But I proved abandonment. I took pictures of the inside of the house, the condition, everything like that, and I bulldozed it because I figured nobody's going to come back for it if it's not there. And so after that 90-day period, I had someone that was a first-time home buyer, and I contacted them and I said, hey, I know you're looking for somewhere to put a Clayton home. Could we work something out? And we made it happen, and we did, the title tax rider. through a third party on that one and gave them clear warrantable title, and Clayton financed it, and they live there and raise their kiddos. And I drive by every once in a while and go, wow, that turned out really cute. So um, other ones have been, I bought properties and I was like, all right, I'm young, stupid, and I had $20,000 and I'm going to go drive up here and see what this property looks like the day of the tax sale. And there was someone in the home. And so my husband and I have a less than fond memory of me opening the door to the home because it was unlocked. No cars. I will say, like, house looked abandoned. In all, to defend my stupid choices, house looked abandoned. Opened the door, and there was a gentleman who had partaken in some recreational activities, and he was asleep on the couch. I hoped he was sleeping heavier than I thought he was, and I took off running out the door. So all my husband hears is some four letters and get in the car. And so I proceeded to drive backwards at about 40 miles an hour down a gravel driveway, about half a mile before we finally turned around. And we never did that again. So again, do as I say, not as I do. I highly recommend, even if you do procure a tax sale property, have a buddy go out there with you, that works in the police force, or make a courtesy call to KPD and just ask them to come out there with you. Nobody wants to clean up a murder scene, so they would be more than happy to oblige that and just schedule that time with them. So yeah, I could keep going. There are some doozies. But most of them have been happy. So most of them have been decent. There's only like the three horror stories I tell people of like, hey, do as I say, not as I do. But yeah, I bought some out of state tax sale properties because I was like, I do tax sales, I can do auctions, I can buy stuff out of state. One went great. Sold it, made a little bit of money, and one went horribly, and it's up for auction in Oklahoma right now. And I'm gonna lose some money on it, but it's gonna sell and not be my problem anymore. So there you go.
Sometimes it's okay just to take those ones and just let them go for the peace of mind of it
Oh,
all. And
absolutely.
yeah, investing is very much like invest at your own risk, and any money that you're using, you should be prepared to be okay with losing if that were the case, because this
Yes.
does not always go right. So I
No,
appreciate you
of
sharing
course.
that, Savannah. That's helpful insight for sure. Um, well, I'm gonna take some time now. We've been going for about like 40-ish minutes. We've covered a good amount of stuff at this point. So I do want to make it available to the 15 or so of us here to, if you have questions, if you have comments, things you'd like to share, to ask, go ahead, like raise your hand or unmute yourself. Like, you've got an outstanding title attorney here. If you have your legal questions or your title pieces here, you've got Savannah with amazing wealth of knowledge and experience in this space as well. So feel free. Raise your hand. I know we had that one came up in the chat, so thank you for asking that. I think Garrett, you asked that on behalf of Taylor and Chad. Um, Questions, comments, queries, quibbles, concerns. Garrett, you're the man. Go for it.
I'm trying to think of a good question, but I'm just learning there's so much more due diligence I think one needs to do before just showing up and buying a property. And I had no idea about any of that. And just, I figured it's up for tax sale, then it's basically up for grabs. It's going to be yours once you close, and there's really not much to worry about. So I'm very happy just learning about all that and diving into doing your own due diligence, even, much before the tax sale.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna go ahead and throw in the chat, and I'll do this as a follow-up email for everybody. But I'd created a map for Google Maps that you can click and highlight and add, and this will give you all of the properties that are currently on that map. So if you either get tired of looking at 70 pages of things, wondering like where these things are, this should give you a good resource to see, hey, like this is where it is. You can click it as a pin, go drive by it. Uh, that said, there's a number of properties that are on this that are inevitably not going to make it to the tax sale. There will be deals that will be cut like beforehand. People will catch up. I mean, we were talking right before this chatted, like there's a couple like right on Gay Street, like downtown, like beautiful
Yeah.
buildings that like there's no way. I'd be amazed if that actually was to make its way through. right?
Listen,
But
somebody wants to loan me $500,000. Let's go buy it. I'm ready. Let's go.
That's cool. All right. Yeah, Brian Evans got a question in the chat here. Can you quickly clarify the redemption period specifically to Knox County? Again, it seemed inconsistent with the state. So, as we noted, I would imagine like the state sort of supersedes things, LuAnn. Am I like out of pocket to kind of note
Yeah,
that
so the
that
right of redemption that I'm talking about is the state statute.
Mhm.
So, if it's less than or equal to 5 years, that's when you're at the 1 year right of redemption. So that's what we're typically talking about because generally the properties are going up for sale before you hit that 5 years, typically. Now every county does things differently. So some counties will hit it right at 2 years, some will wait a little bit longer. It just kind of depends on the county. If you're in that 5 to 8 year period, then the right of redemption is 180 days. And then if you're over 8 years, equal to or over 8 years, then it's 90 days. The evidence of abandonment is where, again, it takes very specific findings. But if you can prove the abandonment, you can get that lessened to 30 days. Did that answer the
yeah.
question?
LuAnn,
Oh,
can you all hear me?
Yeah.
yeah, you're good, Ryan.
Hey, I appreciate it, guys. Yeah, I figured I'd jump off on this one. And if I start my video, my computer likes to crash, so bear with me on that.
You're
That's
fine.
good.
So yeah, that's something where again I thought I caught that earlier on, and I was surprised just based on a bit of research to understand how many seemingly, and correct me if I'm off on this understanding that how many people actually will try to come back and redeem the property, especially if it's again well kept, maybe it's dated but it's still livable versus something totally abandoned, and of course getting that information of potentially not only carrying the insurance and yes they're redeeming that, but let's say it's a fix and flip, you have to hold for a year before really I'm going to invest any type of large capital into eventually getting it back on the market. So sounds like that's the case, and maybe a segue to that. Am I off in believing or hearing that redemption is rather common? Any notes or insights into that?
It is. And one of the things I would say, Ryan, specifically from a fix and flip standpoint, if your investment to hold the property during the redemption period is going to exceed the 12% that you would make, my 2 cents would just be to stay away from that. That's why, in my opinion, you do look for those more abandoned properties and things like that. Just so, one, you also want to make sure that there's, I see a question in the chat about tenants. You want to make sure that you're not having to then step into a whole different world, which is tenant law and tenant rights in the state of Tennessee. Or, necessarily you're worrying about squatters for a year. If a home's in great condition or even livable condition, we all know that that's a concern about securing the premises. But then you're spending money on locks, you're spending time and energy for the next year to monitor it. You just want to make sure that your investment isn't going to end up becoming a headache. You're not in month 9, like, please God, someone take this property back from me. So just that was always the hard and fast rule for me when I bought something, and you guys can kind of speak to that as well.
Yeah, I think that's smart. And like Savannah said, if there are tenants, if you come to find out there are tenants in that property, you have to go through the eviction process. And so that's court costs, legal fees potentially to get these people evicted. If they don't leave, then you're getting a writ of possession and you're paying somebody to come move their belongings out of the home. All that stuff can kind of add up. So it's just a risk. Are you willing to take that risk or not? But it can get dicey.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I know Chad had put that question there, like the redemption period being a year, can we rent out the property in the meantime and can we just kick out the tenant? So if there's existing tenants, you're certainly inheriting like some challenges there. And if you were to place tenants, you might be putting yourself into a bit of a pickle there as well, because now you place somebody and you're right, they would still have some tenant rights attached to that, and that could be a real troublesome spot to get yourself into in the meantime. Might not be the best way to go about it. More or less just be patient and willing to sit on it.
The risk there would be misrepresentation, because you place a tenant, hey, I own this property, I sign a lease with you, and then someone comes back and redeems it. Oh, wait, actually, I no longer own this property. I haven't given you the appropriate notice of the circumstance. Now, again, not legal advice. There would be people in potential short-term situations that would understand with a moment's notice they might have to be displaced or unhoused, that would be willing for, in exchange for discounted rent, to take that liability on. But I would caution you as a property owner, again, then you get in the situation of improvements. What if your HVAC goes out? What if the roof leaks? What if there's a foundation issue? You're spending more money than you're making off rent because you've discounted it so someone's okay with your situation, and you're making no money on top of that 12% because you've spent it all improving someone else's property. But that's my 2 cents.
Real good points. Real good points for sure.
So,
Savannah, Garrett asked to kind of dive into that a little bit more. What was that experience like when it came to proving abandonment? And sort of what was your process or steps going forward?
It was a little easier than like the full formal proving abandonment process, because Knox County was very familiar with the property, since it had been, in delinquency for going on 9 years. And so it was a phone call. It was a, hey, forgiveness versus permission. I'm going to bulldoze this house. The ceilings have separated from the walls. The walls have separated from the floors, and there are no floors. So just want to make sure, we're all good here. I've verified, Knox County had been out a couple times just for kids playing in, the house, and that wasn't a safe idea that I wanted to maintain. And so I called them and I was like, hey, I have pictures of before. I have I have a license for this. I have a liability license. There won't be any issues whatsoever. I have insurance on the property. Can I pay someone to bulldoze the house? And they were like, well, sure. Basically was the answer. And I was like, okay, bye. Again, not legal advice. Do as I say, not as I do. But in that situation, just because I skated by on a technicality doesn't mean that you can. So, the full process would be those 3 inspections. The full process is providing photographic evidence, having documentation. You might even want to have someone from the police department come out and just do a walkthrough and put in a police report. Hey, there is no one living in this home, and so you have all that paperwork to show it is actually abandoned. But there are some properties that Knox County is like, yeah, we're super familiar with this, and just be gone. So
go for it. Yeah, go for it. Thank you for walking us through that. And I'd say, to the point, we talked about it earlier, but don't hesitate to go down to the city county building or to call folks down at planning and zoning. Like, incredibly helpful every single time I've needed a question answered from the city or county. It's usually a phone call away or an email away to get that question answered in a pretty reasonable time. Like, again, they're there as a public service. They're there to help. They're there to be a resource. So they're not going to give you bad information. They want to see these properties improved if they're in, states such as like Savannah mentioned, where it's just completely falling apart at that point. They typically get to be pretty familiar with those homes, and they want to see this turn around. They want this to be better housing for people here. That's good stuff for sure. For sure.
Absolutely. Corey, if you want, if we have time, I don't mind to read off 1 or 2 of the tax sale properties in the notice, and
let's do it.
You and LuAnn can kind of just go, hey, I would bid on that, or I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. If you want.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to flip to a random page because there's so many of them. Let's see. All right, guys, we have got 924 West Woodland Avenue, 37921. It does have a legal description. It goes into, the lot description, references the plat cabinet A, the slide, the map book, in the registrar's office in Knox County. The same property conveyed by a special warranty deed. I need to make note of that. September 14th, 2011, from Fannie Mae. Recorded, in the registrar's office for Knox County. This conveyance is made subject to any and all applicable restrictions, agreements, easements, building setback lines are shown by the records of Knox County Registrar's Office. So again, they're rerouting you back to them. Interested persons and encumbrances. Notice of lien. Also, this is tax property number 443. If you guys are like, hey, I want to know this, and I'm going to look at it later.
I pulled up on my screen here for those that are kind of curious to know.
Great. This is perfect. Interested persons and encumbrances. There's a lien, number 1, City of Knoxville, $266, not including penalties and interest. We want to know what that is. Lien by the City of Knoxville, $315. City of Knoxville, $4,199.90. I'm sure the city's very familiar with this property the longer I read. City of Knoxville, $200. City of Knoxville, $211. City of Knoxville, $211. So these are 2014, 15, 15, 15, 17, 18 compliant or complaint in favor of the City of Knoxville codes enforcement in 2023. Order in favor of codes enforcement in April of 2013. Little typo there. Notice of lien for fine or restitution imposed for the amount of $559,000. Are we all seeing this? We're all
Yes, ma'am.
looking at this number.
Yep.
I just want to make sure
right
before
there.
Yeah. Notation of any will or probate proceeding, none. Notation of any bankruptcy proceeding, none. Other matters affecting title. Restrictions, sewer line and water line easements, quitclaim deed from 2005 as an executor for an estate through his attorney in fact. We're going to keep going. I mean, they're listing off some folks that I would want to talk to. A correction deed is needed. The quitclaim deed is self-serving, as the seller conveyed to himself. There's a trust. A release was recorded, attempting to release the prior owners, but a corrected release should be recorded. So I'm looking at, there's estate issues. The City of Knoxville, we've got some situations, but the total taxes are only $2,000 for Knox County, and the city, $2,300 as well. So you look at that, if you don't read all of this and you go, oh, wow, I'm going to get this for $5,000. This is a great deal. Not knowing that we're now in a situation where you have potential quiet title that you're going to need to work through, a will that's not been satisfied, correction deeds, LuAnn's nightmare. I can see the sweat forming on her brow. I'm kidding. LuAnn's like, please God, don't tell people to buy this. And then also the City of Knoxville's put a lot of money into telling people that there's something wrong. There's something going on. So, honestly, for me, I would scrap it. Immediately, if I get like 3 lines into that one, I would have scrapped it, but I kept reading just for all purposes of you guys to understand. But yeah, no, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole, my friends. Probably something that's going to end up being purchased, honestly, by KCDC and somewhat reused for housing in that fact, which is KCDC is one of the largest purchasers that ends up taking these tax sale properties and turning them into housing. So,
for sure.
That can be their problem because the City of Knoxville will release that. Yeah, go for it.
You mentioned the quiet title action, and you previously mentioned you've been through one. So
yes.
When you had to deal with it on your 26 heirs, were you all able to personally serve those heirs, or was that publication?
We personally served. Perfect. We did publication and then followed up with personal service.
Okay. So that's just another note for everyone is you hear a lot of times, okay, well, you can buy this and then you can go through a quiet title action and then it's insurable, which if there's personal service that you can prove generally works. But the same due process issue comes into play if you can't personally serve these people and you just do notice by publication. That doesn't solve that due process issue. So just keep that in mind. That's just a little side note caveat.
Absolutely. And also you can't deed something to yourself.
There's
that. Yeah. And if you're a power of attorney for an estate, you can't quitclaim deed it to yourself. You can with checks and balances and a lot of paperwork, but just don't. I wouldn't touch that one, my friend. So,
no.
Unless you just want to hold it for your 12%. But honestly, that sounds like way more headache than 12%. That sounds like the City of Knoxville is going to call you to come clean something up and it's someone else's mess.
Yeah, 100%.
All
Great
right.
example to share. I appreciate you helping unpack that.
Yeah,
Savannah, that was
yeah,
good stuff for sure.
of course.
That's awesome. Anybody else? Any kind of like follow-up questions? We've got a few more minutes here, like reserved. I want to be respectful of people's time, and again, a good opportunity to get some questions answered if you got them. Too. All right, cool. Right on. Awesome. Well, ladies, LuAnn, Savannah, thank you all so much for jumping onto this. I know we kind of threw this together here just over the last couple of days, so I appreciate you guys just being good sports of helping jump into this. Thanks y'all for joining. I really hope you guys got some value out of this. I'll make sure to do a follow-up email with some of these resources that we shared here as well, so you guys all have that as part of this. And yeah, as always, man, be excellent. Thanks, y'all.
Thank
And don't be
you.
a stranger. Don't be a stranger at the tax sale. Come say hi.
We'll see y'all for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
hope to see everybody there.
Thank
Yeah.
you guys.
Thank you all.
Bye, guys.
See y'all.